No. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Blanca Kellermeyer. I'm a mother of two. I'm a neuroscientist and a peaceful parenting coach at Dr. Blanca Peaceful Parenting. I help busy parents get their kids to cooperate for a more harmonious home. I'm very excited to be co-hosting this series with Dr. Sonali Dasgupta. Sonali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Blanca. I'm Dr. Sonali Dasgupta, a research scientist, mom of a talented teenager, and founder of the STEM Monsters education platform. We partner with schools to implement hands-on STEM programs that foster interdisciplinary innovation by focusing on design thinking and first principles approach to learning. Welcome to Nurturing Minds, a science driven approach to parenting and education. In this monthly LinkedIn Live series, we'll deep dive into topics that matter most when it comes to raising and educating our children. In each session, we'll provide practical, science backed strategies to help our kids thrive as they go through the journey of being a child to a young adult and eventually responsible adults of our society. We'll cover topics ranging from limited screen time to overcoming the fear of failure to setting boundaries for success. So, Blanca, would you like to introduce today's topic?
Absolutely. Today, we're focusing on fostering intrinsic motivation in our kids. That is helping them find the joy in learning and doing things for their own good, for their own growth, rather than relying on external rewards or punishments.
So, maybe for the benefit of our listeners here, can you briefly explain what is intrinsic motivation and why is it so crucial for the children? I mean, you're a neuroscientist, right? So, what's the neuroscience behind it and how does it affect the long term success of children?
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's start with a bit of brain science then. I'll keep it brief and I won't go into details. So there is a part in our brain which we call the motivational system. And we also refer to this as the reward center. And this is where the neurotransmitter called dopamine is released. So anything that we experience as rewarding, as fun and rewarding, for example, building a Lego set or playing with a pet, winning a sports game or earning money. So all of these increase the levels of dopamine in our brain. So when dopamine levels are low, that leads to lower drive, lower effort, so altogether lower motivation to complete a certain task. So it's harder to make ourselves do something like homework, for example, for kids. So optimal dopamine levels are key to motivation. Now, you asked about why it's important to foster this type of motivation in our children. And so if we take a step back and think about our long-term goals as parents for how we want our kids' lives to work out. So most of us want our kids to be a good person and to do the right thing, even when no one is looking, right? So this is where we need intrinsic motivation, which is the inner drive in kids, so that when they commit to something, they persevere even when things get tough. And so, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting. I was just thinking as you were talking, like I read somewhere that isn't it for the video games, the sound that plays when every time they win a point, the tring, it is actually the frequency is matched so that the dopamine levels are kind of connected to that. So the frequency of the sound with every buzzer that goes on a on a mobile screen app or a game actually triggers that dopamine rush, and that's why children so easily become addicted to gaming and video games.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
really interesting.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So obviously the people who design video games and even like people at Netflix who design like series and movies these days, they're well aware of how dopamine works and what kind of excitement level is needed to capture the audience's attention, whether that's children or adults. I mean, I don't know about you, Sonali, but I'm guilty of, scrolling on my phone and not being able to put it down. So why sometimes we ask our children to do it when we do it ourselves. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because if the Netflix producers can do it and the filmmakers can do it, it's high time that you and I, as parents and educators, should be aware of it and start utilizing that knowledge because it's out there. And
Exactly.
that's part
Yeah.
of the purpose why we are doing this discussion.
Exactly. Yes. So I just wanted to touch base on so the other type of motivation, which we call extrinsic motivation, which is quite often used in at home even or and education systems with grades and all sorts of incentives like sticker charts and rewards or even consequences or punishments. And then the problem with these is that the science shows that these type of tactics that are forced onto children undermine their intrinsic motivation, that they can actually end up performing lower. It crushes their creativity, and it also leads to bad behavior because external motivators ultimately reinforce the idea that someone else is in charge of their lives other than themselves. So with that, I mentioned sticker charts and grades. So with you in an educational setting, how would you foster intrinsic motivation in the classroom?
I mean, it's very interesting that you ask because I think the entire education system is based on grades and external rewards and stars in the classroom. But I was going through a book and I came across this effect. It's actually research, there has been enough research to understand this, and it's known as the overjustification effect. So, what it actually says is that extrinsic rewards like sticker charts, as you mentioned, or even grades or candies in some places as prizes, whatever be the form of prize, they can actually decrease the intrinsic motivation that a child has. And when what it ends up doing is students start associating the learning with the reward. So their motivation to do something is the reward. And once that reward stops, then the learning stops. So that's why in a classroom setting, it is so important that we start dissociating the learning process from the reward and look at it as an assessment in whatever form that may be. So, what I have seen after interacting with so many students and where we have successfully achieved intrinsic motivation of the children, some of our kids, for example, in the programs keep joining in for 3 years, 4 years, week on week, without their parents asking them to join in. So, one is relate the learning to the real life. So if you're studying mechanics, for example, connect it to cars if a child loves that. Connect it to entertainment park if the children like it. So that's one thing. Relate the learning to the life and the likes of the child. The second is autonomy in how they approach a task. Don't tell the child how to problem solve because that's what you're trying to build up. So give autonomy on how they want to learn, how they want to approach. They may fail, that's all right, but give them that autonomy. And the third one, I think, which is the key to fostering intrinsic motivation in children, is to encourage the growth mindset at every stage. And when I say growth mindset, is embrace failure and tell them you are growing with every single step, be it a success or be it a failure. In fact, what we have also realized in some places is like, parents and teachers have different approaches to motivation. You being a parenting coach, you might have one, we might be having at this point a similar approach to it. But a lot of times there is a conflict that arises between how they are encouraged to solve a problem in school versus at home. So, I mean, how do you handle that? You being a parenting coach, how would you advise our listeners to approach that?
Yeah, so I think that's a very because obviously the education system is built around using these tools, and it's quite difficult to change a system of that magnitude. What we can do in the home, though, is as you mentioned, fostering autonomy. So again, rather than asking children to, okay, you need to do your homework, you need to do it like this, and forcing our own stress perhaps on the children that we fear for them, because a lot of times it's the parental fear that you fear how they will turn out, right? Because our ultimate goal is that we want them to be successful in their lives, and we fear that if they get a bad grade, they won't get into university, and then they won't have that job, and then they won't have security and all that. So a lot of what I try and coach parents around is tuning into that fear, and realizing that it's actually they do, our kids do have a brain in their heads, and they do want their lives to work out, and everything is in there. It's just a matter of providing the right ingredients, the right soil, the right amount of sunlight and water, if we're thinking about a plant analogy, and they will grow. We just have to be there as the nutritious soil for them to be able to grow. And I really liked what you said about the journey and embracing the learning journey. So another thing that we can do as parents, rather than falling back on external rewards and external motivators, is to really be that safe space. Even if our kid comes home with a bad grade, it's okay. It's just one grade. It doesn't mean that their life won't work out. And if we're not fussing about it, then they will have that internal drive to make it better.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I exactly know, because I'm guilty of it myself. When my daughter would come back, and I've gotten used to her getting good grades. Not that I care about it, but I've just gotten used to it. It's a practice and a habit that has become of me. And I consciously have to take a step back and say, it's just grades. It doesn't matter. And sometimes, in the urge of the moment, or because we have, as you very rightly said, so many things working around us, we feel compelled to behave in a manner which is not necessarily how we want to. So being conscious about how we respond, I think, is crucial to help them develop and not fear doing what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. And it's and I would just like to highlight again that it's not just, so even if they're struggling right now, it doesn't mean that it won't work out. So just tuning into that things change, they constantly evolve. Yeah. And as long as we're there and support them with our unconditional love, then through that connection that we have with our children, they will want to thrive. They will want to seek our approval. They will want to look good in our eyes. And it's through that connection that we have with them that they want to achieve that.
I mean, I love what you said there, Blanca, because I think one of the things we always forget, or we tend to forget, is at the end of the day, the biggest motivation that a parent can give to a child is telling them that you'll be loved no matter what. That is all they need. They just want to make or feel proud going to the parent and saying, yes, I did this, and getting a positive feedback. So that's so true. I think that's the biggest thing we as parents should be doing. Mm-hmm. Instead of us also leading in on other parameters or extrinsic factors.
Which is difficult because I think we're part of a society where we measure things in ways like grades or performance and performance based indicators, and I think it sends the wrong message to parents as well. So I think that's probably where the fear is coming from a parental perspective, is that we want our kids' lives to work out, but so do they. Yeah. So if we remember that our kids also want their lives to work out, then maybe that will ease that anxiety that parents might have.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's so true. One of the things, like when we're doing projects with children and they don't necessarily get the right result the first time, one of the things we say to the parents, their parents also, is it doesn't matter how many times have you failed when you were a child, and look where you are now. So in the long term, take a step back, look at it from a bigger perspective, and you will know what is right for your child.
Yes.
Myopic view, which kind of gives us this, which kind of pushes us and forces us to behave in a way which we probably don't need to. Just step back and look at it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Sonali, one of the challenges that parents often face is helping children take ownership of their own learning and goals. So, can you give us some advice on how we can encourage our children to take more responsibility for their learning rather than relying on us or their teachers or even external motivators?
I'm so glad you asked that, because one of the things I truly believe in is that as teachers, our job is actually not to teach. Our job is to guide and to offer that scaffolded learning and support to the children so that they can decide how they want to learn. So I think one of the things which has worked for most of the students we've worked with, whether in schools or in the after school programs, wherever we've been working with the students, and this is across the world, this is not just related to India or UK, is that offer them the autonomy to learn, at the same time give them the support they want to go on that path, because ultimately they are students, they are children, so they need the support. So don't give them solutions to the problem they're trying to solve, but brainstorm together as to what might be a solution. So that gives them the ownership of having figured out the solution themselves, and that gives ultimately moves on to motivation, intrinsic motivation, that yes, I did it. The other thing which I think is very powerful tool is a reflection exercise at the end of each task, or even through the task as they're solving, is trying to understand where their weaknesses were, where their strengths were, celebrate what they did well, and learn from what did not go as planned. Because it's not a failure, it just didn't go as planned. That's what it is. And the third thing I think which has worked very well, is again, it comes back to the growth mindset, is it's not about whether they failed or they succeeded in a task. It's how each situation is an opportunity to learn. So if they get that opportunity, if we keep focusing on that opportunity, children will not be scared to fail. Like one of the examples we do is when we do a quiz as an assessment, we tell the students that whosoever gets the most wrong answers has the highest opportunity to learn. So there are no winners.
I
And
love
that's
that.
how and that's how, at the end of it, even if a child cannot answer all the questions, they're happy. Ma'am, I learned the most. So it's about what we tell them when they're learning, which actually helps them to foster their ownership and self intrinsic motivation that we're talking about today to complete a task.
Yeah, oh, I love that. So with the, you mentioned the scaffolding, and I just wonder about, because obviously I think part of it is finding the style of learning for each pupil, right? So if we think of it in a more systematic way, how do you think we can support everyone individually with their own style of learning?
So again, it brings me back to that statement where instead of giving the solution, where you are applying your own learning style to approaching the solution, work with them to figure out their path to the solution. And in that way, when they are in charge of finding the solution to a task or approaching a certain task, they will automatically steer towards what they are most comfortable with. So each child's learning style is different, as you said. So somebody would say that I'll make a diagram rather than write down notes, while the other might say I'll draw a mind map, and the third one might say I'm going to write a story about it. So let them learn the way they want to learn, but be there to support them in case they need you.
Yeah, I think that really is true from a parental perspective as well.
Yes.
So if we parents and educators work more closely, I think we can help our
Oh,
kids
it's so
become,
essential.
yes.
It
Yeah.
is so essential. Because every parent, I think there's no parent who doesn't want the betterment of their child, right? Every parent wants the best for their child,
Yeah.
and all parents are doing it for the best outcome. So how do you actually suggest parents, because everybody has their own parenting way and
Mhm.
manner that they find most comfortable with, what do you suggest to parents when where they know their child the best? How do you suggest they approach a certain problem that might be that the child might be facing, and how to resolve a conflict maybe?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, Sonali, because it's a very important um, thing, and we can exercise this on an everyday basis because it's not just in education; it's in general life. So, what you mentioned about problem solving together. So, I really like this method from Dr. Ross Green, who developed this collaborative problem solving, which is very similar to what you were mentioning earlier. And it really goes into digging deep together, and not with like probing questions, but like more subtle questions about like, oh, I noticed that you're struggling with your science project, and then just asking them like, what's going on, like, can you tell me more about it? And then like asking questions about, okay, what it is about, what is it about I don't know, biology. um, I don't know, maybe you can give me an example of a project. But so rather than like reinforcing our way of dealing with the problem, we're asking them to give us how they want to approach it, how they want to resolve the issue. And if we can ask if they want to hear our advice rather than forcing it on them. So I think it all comes back to respecting each other, respecting that we're different humans, we have different brains that might work differently, and that ultimately we want things to work out, whether that's the science project or going to university. And yeah, so that's one thing, the collaborative problem solving. And then the other thing is connection. So in peaceful parenting, we really focus on one-on-one connection with each of our children. So, and that connection time is really led by the child. So we follow their lead. We make sure that we don't enforce anything onto them in that time. And it doesn't have to be a long time. It's like maybe 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes every other day. But in that 10 minutes, we put our phones down, we don't look at our email, we focus all of our attention on our child, and we do things that they want to do. Because then, as you mentioned, the sense of autonomy, that also helps with that. That they
Yeah,
can.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I am so glad you mentioned that because I'm the mom of a teenager. I mean, teenage brains are a completely different thing in themselves,
Yeah,
right?
let's not go into
But
that
I'm so
today.
glad. Yeah, let's not go into it. But I'm so glad you mentioned that because I remember an instance where I had my daughter was going through a process and she was not very happy, and I kept on coaxing in my own subtle way for her to share with me. And it wasn't until I think 12 days, I still remember, when one night she said, I want to tell you what has been happening. So
Mm.
give them the time, which is not so easy as a parent.
No.
Yeah, it's not so easy as a parent, but give them the time to share with you. So just the one thing which has stayed with me, I was reading another article on how children relate to adults, including parents, is they may not want you, but they need you. So
Yeah.
be there for them in every instance, and yeah, wait for them. They will come to you.
Yes, as long as you provide the space and the connection, then they will come, even if it's not when you expect it, if it's not when you want it. Just brace yourselves. Parents,
Yes, I
it's
know.
hard. I know it's hard. And and yeah, they will come eventually. Yes.
Fantastic. I think with that, if we have a few questions, I'm not entirely sure if we can see the comment section over here. Do we have comments from our listeners?
I can't really see any at the moment. But listeners, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments section.
We have a few minutes to take a few questions.
Yeah, if not, then in the meantime, I would just like to conclude on a few things from what I said. And that's basically fostering autonomy in our children, as Sonali, you've mentioned quite a few times during the session. And so as parents, we, as many times as we can, even in the home, allow them to have control over decisions that, in their lives. And the single one most and biggest thing that we can do is we support their passions. So if we support, if they're passionate about music, if they're passionate about art or football or swimming, support that, because if they experience that type of motivation and the motivation to get better and grow in something that's challenging, that creates the brain pathways already, which will then be available for other tasks that are less exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important that we understand, and you mentioned the thing about learning pathways and the neural networks that happen with the child, because I think we underestimate how quickly those pathways happen and how much, how little of an effort it is required to actually form that, which can last a lifetime. And I think to summarize and add to your key points that you shared with us, in addition to the autonomy and to uh, align ourselves to their passion rather than the other way around, is also to try and connect with them and give them the time and space to come to you for the support rather than to for you to tell them what they need to do. And that's ultimately what dissociates the entire learning journey from a specific reward at the end of the journey, because learning should not be driven by the end result. The process of learning itself and the joy of the journey itself is what should motivate them. And the only way to do that is actually by praising their efforts and not the final result itself.
Yeah,
So I think, please.
Yes, it's the journey. Yes, you said that so beautifully, Sonali. It's the journey that we need to embrace rather than focusing on the end result, because that will not make us happy along the way. And then, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So if do we have any questions? Because I'm unable to see the comments on my end for some reason.
I can't see any, I think. No, I don't see any.
Okay. All right then. So I really hope that our listeners who watch it now or later, this will be put up on the YouTube channel as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send us, DM us on our LinkedIn profiles, respectively. And we'll be having this monthly series of peaceful parenting, and we'll cover various topics to help our children thrive in today's world while not becoming stressed ourselves, right? So stay tuned for our next session on how to praise effectively without creating dependency. So with that, I hope all the listeners had a great time and could go back with few tangible, actionable points on how to use rewards, on how not to use rewards, rather to encourage intrinsic motivation. Blanca, would you like to do the final conclusion?
Yes, so just again reiterating connection, autonomy, and allowing our kids to follow their passion. So if we focus on these three things, then that will foster their self-motivation and drive. Thank you,
Awesome.
Sonali.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Blanca. And I had a lovely time. And listeners, do tune in for the next session. It's going to be super interesting. And I really hope you can go back with more actionable points to implement in your lives and with your children and students. Till then, Be happy and enjoy.
Yeah,
Bye
have a
bye.
lovely September, everyone. We'll see you in October. Bye.
Bye bye.